On May 1st, 1592, the Japanese army landed at Busan. Within 20 days, they had taken Busan, advanced north at a pace that stunned everyone, and were approaching Seoul. The joseon army was collapsing. The commanders were unprepared. The defenses they had planned for a Japanese invasion had assumed the enemy would move slowly. They did not. On May 30th, 1592, King Seonjo of Joseon held a late-night emergency council in the royal palace. The debate lasted until nearly dawn. The conclusion was reached before sunrise. The king would leave. He crossed the Imjin River in the early morning hours. He was fleeing his capital with his court, his treasury, and whatever could be loaded onto carts on short notice. He left his people behind. What happened next? In the streets of Seoul, in the waters around the Korean peninsula, and in the choices made by a naval commander the king despised, is the story of how Korea survived a war it nearly lost before it started. To understand what Seonjo did, you need to understand how fast the Japanese moved. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Japan's military ruler, had been planning the invasion for years. His stated goal was to conquer China using Korea as a corridor. To do this, he needed Korean cooperation or Korean submission. Korea refused. On April 13th, 1592, roughly 160,000 Japanese troops crossed to the Korean mainland. The Joseon military was not prepared for this. Joseon had been at peace for nearly 200 years. The army was theoretically large but practically deteriorated, poorly trained, poorly equipped, and led by officials whose positions were based on civil examination scores rather than military experience. The weapons were outdated. The fortifications were incomplete. Busan fell in hours. Dongnae fell the same day. The southern regions were overrun within days. The Japanese army moved north using the main roads, and local resistance crumbled. In Seoul, the reports coming in were increasingly alarming. Then they were catastrophic. Then the decision had to be made. The night Seonjo left Seoul, something else happened. The palace servants and low-ranking officials left first. Then, when word spread through the city that the king was leaving, the people of Seoul did not respond with loyalty or grief. They set the palace on fire. The Gyeongbok and Changdeok palaces, the symbolic centers of Joseon royal authority, burned as Seonjo fled north. Some accounts say escaped slaves burned them, destroying government records that documented their status. Some say it was general chaos. What is certain is that the fire was not Japanese. The king's own subjects burned his palace while he was still close enough to see the smoke. Seonjo reached Pyongyang, then continued north as Japanese forces advanced. He eventually reached the northernmost provincial capital of Uiju, near the Chinese border. He sent messengers to the Ming Emperor asking for military aid. Then he waited. While the king fled, a naval commander named Yi Sun-sin was preparing to fight. Yi was the commanding admiral of the Joseon Left Naval Command on the southern coast. He was 47 years old. He had been in his position for about a year. He had spent that year doing something unusual for a Joseon official, actually preparing for war. He had repaired and built ships. He had drilled his sailors. He had overseen the construction of a new kind of warship, armored, with a reinforced deck and cannon ports on all sides. These vessels, known as geobuksion or turtle ships, had never been deployed in actual combat. On May 7th, 1592, 4 days before Seonjo left Seoul, Yi Sun-sin met the Japanese fleet in his first naval engagement. He destroyed 26 ships. He lost none. Over the following months, he fought and won a series of engagements that progressively strangled the Japanese supply lines along the coast. A land invasion requires supplies. Supplies travel by sea. Yi Sun-sin cut the supply line. The Japanese advance stalled. The invasion that was supposed to reach Beijing never reached Pyongyang. Seonjo did not celebrate Yi Sun-sin's victories the way historians later would. Seonjo was a complicated man, educated, capable of intelligence, but also deeply insecure and suspicious of officials who became too prominent. He had a pattern throughout his reign of undermining capable subordinates who threatened to overshadow him. As Yi Sun-sin's victories made him the most celebrated figure in Korea, Seonjo grew uncomfortable. The Admiral was receiving public praise, gifts from the court, and letters of gratitude from regional officials. He was becoming, in effect, the person people credited with defending Korea. That was a problem for a king who had fled Seoul. In 1597, Seonjo received a report, likely fabricated by Japanese intelligence through a double agent, claiming Yi Sun-sin had disobeyed direct orders. He was arrested, stripped of his rank, tortured, and narrowly escaped execution. He was demoted to the rank of common soldier. Command of the navy was given to a different admiral, Won-gyun. In August 1597, Won-gyun led the Joseon fleet into a Japanese ambush at the Battle of Chilcheonryong. The fleet was almost entirely destroyed. Korea had no navy. With the fleet gone, the Japanese resumed their advance. The situation was catastrophic. Seonjo had no choice. He reinstated Yi Sun-sin as admiral and gave him command of the surviving ships. There were 12. Yi Sun-sin's response, written to the court, is one of the more striking documents in Korean military history. I still have 12 ships. I will not lose. In October 1597, at the Battle of Myeongnyang, Yi Sun-sin maneuvered those 12 ships into a strait where tidal currents ran in their favor. The Japanese fleet numbered approximately 300 vessels. In the narrowed channel, numbers mattered less than positioning. The Japanese fleet was shattered. The war ended in 1598 when Hideyoshi died in Japan and the Japanese forces withdrew. In the final engagement, the Battle of Noryang, Yi Sun-sin was struck by a bullet. He died on his ship. His last recorded words, according to his subordinates, were a request not to announce his death until the battle was over. He did not want the news to break morale. The Imjin War is one of the most significant conflicts in Korean history. It lasted 7 years. It resulted in enormous casualties and the destruction of much of the Korean countryside. The Joseon dynasty survived. The dominant narrative that emerged afterward gave most of the credit to Ming Chinese forces who came to Korea's aid, which Seonjo preferred, since it positioned the victory as something received rather than earned, and deflected attention from the domestic military failure. Yi Sun-sin was honored with the highest posthumous titles. His statue stands in central Seoul today. He is considered, by consistent popular and scholarly consensus, one of the greatest military commanders in Korean history. King Seonjo's legacy is more complicated. He fled when he should have stayed. He demoted and nearly executed the admiral who was winning the war, because the admiral was becoming more respected than the king. After the war, He gave most of the credit for survival to Chinese forces and to the land generals who had performed less effectively than Yi. He died in 1608. His reign lasted 41 years. Korea remembered him as the king who ran, and Yi Sun-sin as the general who stayed. This is the Dragon Throne. We cover the rulers of Asia, and sometimes the people who saved kingdoms that rulers abandoned. Subscribe if this story stayed with you. New episodes every week.